This is the Metta Mindcast.
We're live.
All right.
How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Just got more on my plate than, it's always just taking care of stuff.
That's good.
So, yeah, it is.
So you're busy?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing art, working on separating the notes out for the book, working on building some bookshelves at the house. So,
You know how to build bookshelves?
I built a few bookshelves in my day, yeah.
How much space do you leave in between the shelves?
Depends on, there's different sizes of books,
right,
as far as common sizes of books. So you can basically, I've got a chart that basically talks about the average sizes that you can use for like a bigger hardcover art book up to a smaller pulp paperback book.
I put some in my bedroom. I think I did about 13 inches.
Yeah.
But I have some books that won't fit on there.
Yeah. There's a lot of bookshelves, they graduate, so they hold bigger books on the bottom, and as you go up, it gets smaller and smaller,
It's tough to find a good bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
You can't buy them online.
You can't buy a good bookshelf, no. I think I'm gonna put built-ins in the living room, so, yeah.
How much artwork you got going on? Anything you can talk about?
I've got illustrations for the book that I'm working on. I've got a piece for a bigger band that's kind of in motion that I need to just sit down and work on. And just got a big order of Pink Floyd shirts in that I sent out.
Are those the ones that you did about a month ago or a year ago?
Yeah, probably 8-9 months ago, maybe 10 months ago.
Because you did one, I saw a picture of David Gilmour in.
Yeah. Well, he was holding the shirt.
He was holding it, yeah. I saw him in the picture,
Yeah. So,
is that the one that?
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's just a picture of David Gilmour, and I just, crafted the shirt over it. So, hey. Honestly, all this stuff goes back and forth. Every time I make a change on the image, it has to go across the pond, or it has to be sent to, whatever licensing entity that we're, going through here. So, yeah, it's a slow process with some of these bands.
Yeah.
And other bands, they want it yesterday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. It's a good thing you're busy.
Yeah.
It's cool stuff to be working on.
Yeah, it is cool stuff to be working on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm surprised it's lasted as long as it has. So,
I don't know, you're pretty talented, so.
Yeah, I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the art and the reading and the, the whole writing thing lately has kept me, and then just the people asking me to come on different shows kind of takes away some of my time that I would normally be sitting and, researching or, I don't let it take away from my drawing time. I mean, that's pretty much work in the day, so, yeah.
So do you, what do you do, probably 10 hours a day?
If you take housework out of the equation, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
If I'm not working on a piece of art or working on the book or lately I haven't had any reading time just to be able to sit and read, it's nice when those times come through, but lately it's just been mostly listening to books,
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I've been driving.
Yeah. Life is busy. So you try to utilize those moments in between to, give your head something good,
Sometimes I'll try and sit down and start a book, and I just can't get into it.
Yeah.
And other times I can blast right through a book.
Oh, yeah.
But when I'm busy, I'll listen to a book.
Yeah.
but it's too. Sometimes I feel like I'm not into it enough to listen to it.
Yeah,
because I'll be driving, I'll feel distracted, so
Right.
I'll put a podcast on.
yeah, that's a good time for podcasts.
Yeah,
Like when I'm doing the art, I'll listen to a book because I'm like in a constant place with no interruptions, so I can work and kind of still, let that be rotating through my head. But when I'm working on cooking dinner or some task like building something, that's a good time for podcasts.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw you brought your notebook.
Yeah, I brought my notebook. So this just has a few notes of kind of what we were, or what I was thinking we'd talk about today. So in the process of researching the book, basically, there's a part where the Sibylline prophecy.
What about before you go forward?
Yeah.
For new people that be listening,
Yep.
why don't you tell them about the book?
So I'm writing a book on Nimrod, and basically my editor told me to break up one chapter.
And who's Nimrod?
Nimrod is this ancient character of kind of he causes a lot of chaos and he brings a lot of order. So
He's the Nimrod from Genesis.
Yeah.
Built the Tower of Babel.
Babel, right. So basically, I'm kind of tracing this character, the set and the setting, looking at the fact that he got a hold of this, the skin of Adam, and basically became the first skinwalker. So that's what the book's all about, right?
And this is from books that you've been reading, that contain ancient texts.
The ancient texts and
Yeah.
everything, yeah. And everything from biblical to rabbinical to getting into the Sumerian stuff, getting into the Egyptian stuff, getting into and basically, so I'm tracing all the other characters that are basic analogs of Nimrod, from Osiris to Tammuz to Attis. And so basically the editor wanted me to break this chapter up and go into Adonis and Attis, which I was kind of trying to stay away from Adonis.
And Attis is the analog of...
It's a analog form of
Nimrod.
Osiris or Nimrod worship.
Okay, so Osiris, Nimrod, what was the...
I've got King Minos, I've got Tammuz, you have Attis, you have these various characters that basically are, as the religious form moved from culture to culture, they took on slightly different names and qualities depending upon the locale.
So with the Greek version of... The Romans' god Mars was the god of war.
Right.
Greek had the same god, that was Ares.
Right.
And this is the same idea of what you're talking about with Nimrod going back to how many different religions?
Numerous. I mean, it's basically coming out of Southeast Asia and into Mesopotamia, eventually flooding from Phrygia and Syria into Greece.
Phrygia?
Mm-hmm. In Turkey. Turkey. Yep.
So is that what... I've never heard of Phrygia.
Yeah, Phrygia was... So that's the whole thing that I'm really wanting to talk about are these oracles.
So Phrygia is a location.
Phrygia is a location.
Is it a country?
And it's in modern-day Turkey.
It's in modern-day Turkey.
Right.
But it used to be a country.
In its time, it was called Phrygia at one point in history. And basically, this is where we get the Phrygian mysteries that became the root of all the mystery schools. So this basically leads to Attis and Adonis and getting into the various mystery schools of, let's see, in Greece you would have Bacchus was Greece into Roman.
So
Dionysus.
Attis was Nimrod.
It was a form of Nimrod worship, or Osiris worship
In Phrygia.
In Phrygia. And that was just because of the manner in which it was spreading out. But even Isis, she says that in one of the inscriptions, she says she's the daughter of Saturn, and she's also, and she uses the word mysteries in one of the inscriptions, right? And so both those words, Saturn and mysteries, are Phrygian words. They come from Phrygia.
Okay, and then the chapter that you're working on right now is about Attis.
Is about Attis and Adonis. And this is basically, so with Adonis, going back into the Osirian story, right? Osiris is killed twice. And the first time, Set, locks him in this box, this bejeweled box, and pours lead on it, and, slides him down the Nile River, right? And the casket that he's in basically comes to rest in Byblos, or what's the other word? There's a Phoenician word for it as well. But nonetheless, so Byblos is where this casket ends up resting, and it gets subsumed by a tamarisk tree. And basically, Isis comes and finds the tamarisk tree that had been cut down by King Melkart and put in his palace. And they say, some of the stories say she found it because of the pleasant smell that it emanated from it. So it's basically got this this scent that's wafting, that's like flowers and incense. So they find, and Melkart cut it down because he was amazed, and he put it in his palace, and Isis comes and explains to Melkart, Osiris is inside that pillar. So, and Osiris, this is a tamarisk tree, but Osiris was known as the tall standing fir tree, right? And when you get into Attis, he was known as the tall standing pine tree, because it's different regions, different types of trees, still the same symbol, but and then so they cut open this pillar in Byblos, and basically Osiris falls out. Thoth, who we were just seeing on the cover of that alchemical rainbow book, he's there, and he makes like a magic elixir tea that they give to him, and they revive him, and he goes back to Egypt, and Set, his brother, sees he's still alive, and the second time Set cuts him up into the 14 pieces. So, but this first time that he dies in Byblos, there begins to develop a whole series of worshipers that are worshiping this first death of Osiris, that kind of spreads out from there, and it's based around Adonis and Aphrodite, kind of touching on some Greek a little bit, but you have the character of Attis and Cybele, or Cybele, which we've talked about, right? So Cybele was the mother of all the gods, and she was basically the mother of the mountains in Phrygia, and her temple, I guess you would say, was a cave that was on top of Mount Ida. So you would go up there and basically worship the goddess in the cave, and it's kind of like the womb, going back into the womb of the mother, being the cave symbolically. So you're kind of like, and also representative of the underworld. Like you have Persephone going into the underworld, and so there's all these connotations. But nonetheless, there was prophecy that was a part of all this process, where they would basically get in touch with, the entity that they're connecting with. And when you get into...
What entity?
Well, that's
anyone that they're looking for.
Yeah, so later on in the Greek mysteries and the temples with the different prophets, you have... starting with the temple, what was it? The Grove of Dodona, right? So this was a grove that was dedicated to Zeus.
Where is it? In Greece?
We can look it up and see where it's at.
What's it called?
Dodona.
Dodona.
Dodona. Dadonna, I believe. And put Sacred Grove Greek in there. So this grove at Dodona was basically dedicated to Zeus. So when they would get the messages from the oracle, they were coming from Zeus, right? Well, and then you have like the Sibylline oracle, which they were associating with Apollo. So they would be getting messages from Apollo. So, there's the different oracles are connected to different entities. So, there was even in Egypt, there was an oracle, and it was, let's see. So in Egypt, there was an oracle in Egypt located in the Siwa, Siwa oasis. And it was a remote area in the western desert of Egypt, where the temple of the oracle dedicated to the god Amun is situated.
Is Amun the same as Dodona?
No, this is the one in Egypt. The one to Dodona, to Zeus, was in Italy.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. And so you generally, but that's the whole thing. You have these oracles that are everywhere. And people within the religious function of worshiping these different demigods or lower astral forms of entities more related to the physical world. They're actually going in and communicating with these entities, at the Grove of Dodona, originally that was planted by a Hyperborean mother that had come down from Ultima Thule. Are you familiar with Ultima Thule? No. So Ultima Thule, at one time, it was believed that there was that the Earth, before it got its tilt, right? That basically Ultima Thule was this island that was at the very top of the Earth, right? And the way the Earth spun, it got sun most of the time. They said there was 3 growing seasons. They said that though the weather all year round was beautiful. They never had any kind of frost or ice or anything. It was just, and this also directly relates to the idea of the Saturnian golden age, right? And so on this island of Ultima Thule lived the Hyperboreans, right? These are some of the early, they're like in legends and myths of the Greeks and different cultures and the Celts, and you have and as well as the Norse, get into some of these ideas of this, and it's the idea of a great North Island. And there's actually a huge conspiracy based around this, because there's like 4 rivers that go in, and then there's like this big lake that has this island in the center of it, almost like the primordial mound. And basically they, in the Twitterverse or wherever conspiracies are flowing, there's this idea that the North Pole, when you go to Google Earth and look at it, it's completely just grayed out, like kind of like you can't see it, because there's this idea of
Like how close?
that's the whole. There's an area where but it's the whole idea of Admiral Byrd going up there and finding the hole that went in the center Earth. It's this idea of this ultimate Thule, where there's this island but that's the other thing. If the Earth during that time, that it was the ultimate north, right? It would really, after the pole flip, it would actually be Antarctica, right? So ultimately, with the Earth and the pole shift, what was once believed to be Ultima Thule would essentially be Antarctica now. So, but they believe that this was once where essentially the golden age of Saturn was, during this time of Ultima Thule, when all was, and that's when you get into the histories, when there's a perturbance, right? This is where you get the idea of the frost giants in the Norse myths, where the freezing started coming in, and basically, they couldn't grow as many crops. During that time, it was like a land of milk and honey, like the earth provided everything that they needed, right? And then once these frosts started coming in and freezing everything, then they basically had to flee and basically go more down towards the equator, because the way the earth had was spinning had changed, right? So you have these stories of these Hyperborean beings basically coming into different parts, and there's also within the ancient Irish tales, there's these the tales of these ships coming in on these misty fogs that are bringing these like ancestral beings from before recorded time.
Sounds like the tall whites I've been hearing about on Twitter.
Yeah. But so these Hyperboreans came down, right? And in Greek mythology, there was these twin sisters with blonde hair, and they were rather tall, but they were the ones that brought wheat, and bread, and basically, brought the idea of agriculture almost into the scene. Apollo, the god Apollo in Greek mythology, he is a Hyperborean. And when he came down from Hyperborea into Greece, he brought his medicinal gardens and the Apollo tree, or the apple tree, right? Yeah. So, and there's no there's a whole thing where that word just kind of appeared out of nowhere, and there's no phonetic links to tie it back through history. It just kind of appears. But and then you have I can't remember her name, but one of the Hyperboreans came down and basically planted this grove of trees that were ancient trees, that made up this grove of Dodona that Zeus occupied, that the prophets of Zeus occupied, and within that grove of trees, that's where Zeus gave Orion the lion skin. But it's also, they said that there was pigeons or doves, essentially. I'm pretty sure it was pigeons that were in all these trees in this grove of Dodona, right? And basically the prophet, the person doing the prophesizing, they would listen to the pigeons all in their cooing, and almost use that sound as a way to project through, to be able to get the prophecies of Zeus, So, and then you get into what was it, the one at Delphi, which is probably one of the more famous ones, right? This is where essentially the rock that Saturn ate.
This is in Egypt?
No, this is in Greece now.
We're still in, okay. Which one was in Egypt?
Egypt was it's to this goat Let me see if I can find it.
And how does Addis bring us to this?
Well, that's the whole thing. I'm not necessarily talking about Addis. I'm more talking about, but Addis is within the line of all of these different kind of ecstatic, prophetic kind of things, because Addis was the cleric to Mother Kybele, who she basically, you had all these Sibylline prophecies that were connected to this mother goddess kind of energy.
And is Zeus one of...
Zeus would be the father of the Greek gods.
Yeah.
So that's more a male personified oracle.
Yeah.
Whereas the one at Delphi would be to Apollo. So that's more a male oracle. But within Attis and Cybele or Sibyl, you have the Sibylline prophecies, it's a book of these different prophecies that the Sibyl would basically go. So the Sibyl, let's get back to the Delphi story, right?
Okay.
This is, you can look up where Delphi is. But basically this is where the rock kind of that Saturn had eaten, that Mother Rhea had tricked Saturn or Kronos with this rock. And basically, he thought it was Zeus in swaddling clothes. And so Mother Rhea basically took Zeus and hid him away on Mount Ida. So directly tying with Cybele and the mother of the gods, right?
Delphi, Greece is located in the Phocis region. Is that how you say that? Phocis.
Yep.
Of central Greece on the slopes of Mount Parnassus.
Parnassus, right. Yeah. So, you had these different oracles that were basically, and when you get into the function of these oracles, like the people that were leading the countries, right? Like the kings or the different, in the times of Rome, the different Caesars, they would all consult the oracle for literally everything. So if they were going to go to war, they would consult the oracle, and they would have to generally slaughter some kind of an animal. I was reading that they would slaughter a white ram to Pandora. So depending upon the time of the year, depending on the male or female personification that they're doing these rituals to, they all require different facets to be able to connect with that inner. It's like sympathetic magic, basically. And so the one at Delphi, right, was basically the rock that when Saturn threw up or Kronos threw up his children, right? Because he would eat all his children as soon as they were born, right? Kronos.
Why?
Or Saturn. Because he didn't want any of them
to be more powerful than him?
To be more powerful and take his place, right? And he was really threatened by this. So basically, as soon as his children were born, he would eat them. He would devour them. And you can look up the various paintings of Saturn eating his children. There's tons of them through history. But what was it? It was for one of the goddesses that Rhea also had birth in a field of sheep and fed Saturn a foal or a baby horse.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah, so that's and that's Goya that painted that one of Saturn devouring his children. So basically, all of the children are in Saturn's belly, right?
Yeah. Except
for, I think it was Diana or who was it? I can't remember offhand, but and then Zeus, they basically fed this stone that was wrapped in swaddling clothes, right? So it looked like a baby, and he just devoured it in one one bite, right? But then when Zeus got older, right, and he was on, I believe it was Mount Ida. Can we look that up just to make sure? Just Zeus hidden away on Mount Ida, or Zeus, hidden Mount Ida. Let's see what that says.
In a cave at Crete?
In Crete. Does it say what mountain?
Ida.
Mount Ida, yes.
On the island of Crete.
Right. So, and there's multiple Mount Idas. So, and that's the whole thing. Mount Ida is associated with this goddess, Cybele, Sybil. And so Zeus is raised up in this cave outside of Crete, on Mount Ida, and he's taken care of by this goat, called, what was her name? Amethelia. And basically it means like the caring one. She was like the night nurse. Like she always took care of him, like, and also, who was it? Attis also was cast away as a foundling and fed by a goat.
Okay.
So there we have a similar kind of, echo within the system here, right?
Between Zeus and
Attis.
And Attis would be Nimrod.
It's a form of Nimrod.
It's a form of Nimrod. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So it's similar. So is Zeus basically the Greek version of Nimrod, is what you're saying?
Resurrected in some form, right? Because now when you look at when Zeus gets older and he comes out of hiding, right? He goes to Mother Rhea, which is related to Mother Cybele as well, also related to Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, like, this mother goddess, this mother of all the gods that kind of is
it's a repeat.
That's carried through all these nations.
Not exactly a repeat, but certain attributes,
the energetic forces, but so he comes back to Mother Rhea, and Mother Rhea provides like this ipecac potion that basically makes you throw up, right? So they basically make this elixir, or tea, and Mother Rhea gives it to Kronos or Saturn, and
vomits up all the kids.
Well, as he's about to vomit up all the children, right? He goes into fits, so he can't defend himself, and Zeus comes in with this special little scythe, and he cuts off Kronos or Saturn's manhood. Cuts off his generation, cuts off his ability to reproduce, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why they get called Titans, I think, or Tetons, because they were, so. But you get nonetheless the word Titan or Tetons.
This is where the Titans come from. This
right?
is the story of the Titan.
It is because they've taken from, and then the old gods kind of get cast away. There's a war between the old gods and the new gods, and Zeus and Kronos, and basically all those old gods end up getting locked away in the center of the earth in a black cube. Right?
The black cube,
yeah. So, but nonetheless, this oracle that we were talking about at Dodona is to Zeus, which goes back into Mother Cybele, Nimrod worship, this continuing pattern. Some say that the Egyptians the oldest, but if you go through the histories of the timescape, it actually goes back into the Babylonian, Sumerian,
basically that same story goes back
way back further. Before the earliest documentation of it as being an Egyptian story, it was a Sumerian story. It was, and so you kind of, but all of it goes back to the most ancient Mother Cybele, some at least 12,500 to 15,000 years ago. I've even seen some of the fertility statues going back 25 to 40,000 years. But you got to figure we only really have about
25 to 40,000 years.
1,000 years ago that they were making these goddess figurines of the mother goddess. Right. So, but we only have like documentation and writing about this stuff because of the Sumerian clay tablets, going back into some of the earliest stories of Inanna.
Venus of
Willendorf.
Willendorf?
Yep.
Where's that?
Is that the Venus of Willendorf? It looks like it.
The oldest known example of human representation found in Germany and estimated to be around 40,000 years old.
Right.
Archaeologists often interpret such figures as depictions of a mother goddess due to their exaggerated female features, symbolizing fertility and creation.
Right. So we've had these mother goddess kind of fertility statues that go all, and she's also, now you see the two lions there?
Oh, wow.
So those are the lions of Mother Kybele. And she was always framed in with two lions,
Okay.
right? And there's a whole story where a couple of the secondary characters in the origin myths of Mother Kybele, right, that they kind of
is that where Ghostbusters got
the Gozer, the
Gozer?
Gozerian, and the two guardians to
Yeah.
the gate, and
it looks just like, well, it doesn't look just like it, but
very similar,
Yeah.
in form. But these two characters, they did something that upset the mother goddess, and she basically, there's this whole, it's almost like the American Werewolf in London transformation scene where they talk about, their backs are stretching out and the claws coming out of their fingers, and just this whole descriptive.
So those two lions were
people at one point.
Yeah.
Right. But then they became like, her guardians almost, and they actually pull, she rides in what they call a sedan chair, right, which is basically this chair that is elevated almost like a chariot, right, but I think it has four wheels instead of two, and the lions pull the chariot of her riding through the mountains in ancient Phrygia, right? And they would say that when you would hear the thunder rumbling, like in the heavens, that would be Mother Kybele riding through the mountains in her sedan chair being drawn by her lions.
Crazy.
Yeah, but she was the mother of the mountains, or the mountain mama. A lot of times she's referred to as Mama, which I find interesting in regard to John Denver.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, Mountain Mama,
Yeah.
So it's, whether it's a coincidence or whether it is, but John Denver is an interesting character. I mean, he worked for NASA.
Did he?
He's got all these links in with the military-industrial complex. So there's quite a bit of conspiracy out there about John Denver. What's it say?
He was a finalist to be the first civilian on the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986, but was not selected.
Yeah, but he was also an advisory. He was on some advisory board for NASA as well. So, but, so you got this.
He almost ended up on NASA's first space shuttle.
Yeah. So.
He was born in Roswell, New Mexico in 1943.
Yep. There's your UFO connection. But he's got all these, there's some number that appears over. How many albums did he have? There's this number that appears over and over and over with John Denver.
33.
Boom.
Yep.
So, like I said, there's all this mystique kind of surrounding John Denver. And he does, one of his album covers is actually walking down a staircase into a cave. And so there's, a lot of kind of this ancient mystery school imagery tied in with a lot of what John Denver does.
John Denver's real name was Henry John Duschendorf Jr. His father, Henry John Duschendorf Sr., I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but he was a retired Air Force pilot and one of America's foremost test pilots who died in March 1982 at the age of 61. I wonder where he was. So, Roswell, New Mexico, he was an Air Force pilot in the 1940s.
Mixed in with NASA, has 33 albums. It's interesting. But so back to this whole.
That's a lot like Laurel Canyon, like Jim Morrison's dad.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Very much so. So these oracles, though, they're everywhere. So they're all, we see they're in Egypt, they're in Italy. We have these Phrygian oracles that are basically creating the mystery schools that become, and with Attis, he got carried away by Dionysus, right? And then Dionysianism becomes Bacchus, or the worship of Bacchus, which is, all these are associated with divine madness.
Bacchus.
Yep. So Attis, when he
is this in a different region at a different time?
Yeah, this is so this Mother Kybele or Kybele story you can trace for roughly about 12,000 years, as far as what we have in texts.
But what we just saw in Germany is that's way before,
right? Because we don't have any writing that we know of.
So we're assuming that it's a mother goddess,
right? Well, and just the fact that she has the lions, and she's framed by the lions,
yeah,
and she's got and she's in the sitting position, like she's in the sedan chair.
So this has been around for a long time,
a very long time,
and every time it just gets renamed,
right?
Yeah,
right. And when you get into these you have these in Greece, because of all the warfare and turmoil, and they called them the wandering Hellas, where they'd basically wander around Greece, basically giving out prophecies, right? And then you have the character of Cassandra.
No. So
Cassandra was the daughter of the king of Troy.
How do you spell it?
So it's Cassandra, daughter of Troy. But she was the daughter of Troy's king Priam, and Queen Hecuba. And she was a prophetess cursed to accurately predict the future, but to never be believed. And it was the god, here we go again, the god Apollo that had smitten Cassandra, granting her the power of prophecy to win her love. So Apollo was infatuated with her. And when Apollo was rejected, he cursed her so that her predictions would be disbelieved, even though they were always true. So she was, and so anytime you hear people like telling you it's all going to be fire and brimstone and everybody's, going to be in pain and suffering, that's kind of what Cassandra, that's the Cassandra complex, as they call it. So, but then you have the development of these Sibylline oracles that are spreading, that are in all these different cities.
Is this from the mystery schools?
These are coming from the mystery schools.
So the mystery schools are created by people that were worshiping the original goddess.
Right.
And they spread from culture to culture.
Yeah.
And they just renamed all the entities in the story.
Yep.
Okay.
Depending on, it's like you see the Catholic Church going in and taking over certain holidays and just renaming them, but keeping all the original elements. It's kind of along the same lines. It's you get into
so when they talk about Christmas being a pagan holiday, but we've renamed it to worship Christ, and that's when we gave the birth of Jesus to those 3 days.
Right.
But really, it's just...
But it's based around the sun and the movement of the sun. And the sun dying in the sky for 3 days
And
before
then
it starts
starts going,
moving
yeah.
again. Which, if you
So
trace,
winter solstice.
yeah,
solstice.
if you trace all that back, that's really Nimrod worship. So all that on the solstice at the darkest time of the year, it all goes back to Nimrod worship. So you have these oracles, and then there was the oracle in Athens to the mother goddess, Kybele or Kybele, that. What's really interesting about Athens so what happened was, with this cult, you kind of have these, because Attis had cut off his manhood, right, in a fit of ecstasy, right, in an ecstatic, frenzied state, right. So basically, they reach this higher level of consciousness, and this all kind of ties back to the divine androgyne. Every culture has this story of this original being that was before humans, that was basically both male and female, right? So Indra in the Hindu texts, she was an androgyne. But they referred.
Was Kybele?
Kybele was the goddess. She was the mother.
Okay.
Right? But Attis, who is her cleric, he basically, because of the whole situation and how it came down, the king found out Kybele was his daughter that he had abandoned as a foundling. And then he said, you can't marry the love of your life, being Attis. And Attis got so upset that he basically demasculated himself, right? And this is very much like when you look at Zeus, going back into the story of demasculating Kronos or Saturn, right? Going back to the story of Osiris, where when Set on the second
cut him into pieces.
Yes, on the second death of Osiris, when he cut him into pieces, the phallus,
so it's another element that's been repeated
over and over. And you see it coming from Mesopotamia, Southeast Asia, through Egypt, and that's the thing. The Attis and Adonis in this area of Phoenicia, which back to more up towards Egypt, right? That first death of Osiris, where that happened, where all this Attis worship kind of developed, that was the same region that the king of Tyre, when he called up the fine Finnish masons to go and put the beautiful, extravagant touches on Solomon's temple, right? The first temple, yeah. He called up these Gibbum or these Gibellum or these Gibbelites that were the worshipers of Attis, right? So those were the guys that the king of Tyre, King Hiram, right, called up and basically sent to Solomon's temple to do the finish work. They were the fine finishing masons that basically the Freemasons trace their lineage back through this group relating to Attis, right? And so when you have because that's the thing, they were the sacred temple builders. They were the ones that were in charge of building the sacred spaces for these oracles to be located in, for this divine revelation to be kind of brought about, right? So as these temple builders, these Gibelum, that are, and there's a couple places where it said Attis got carried away by Dionysus, right? And Dionysus is one of the sons of Zeus, that basically Hera, Zeus's wife, right? She was jealous that because Zeus was always sleeping around with all kinds of different women. He's got so many illegitimate children, out there, and Hera was always upset. But Hercules, yeah. But now Hera, there was these ancient springs, that the springs of Hesperides, I believe was what it was called. That and there's a couple different people that bathe in these springs, but every year Hera would go and bathe in these springs and get back her virginity every year, right? But still, Zeus is running around, just pumping out all these kids everywhere, and one of these kids was Dionysus, right? That basically Hera went and tricked the mother and said, don't you want to know what Zeus really looks like? He comes to you in these different forms, but you've never seen the real Zeus. And so, Dionysus's mother's like, before we, I need to see, I guess it was in the act of love making or something where she convinced him that he would show her his real self.
This isn't going to end well for her, is it?
It's not going to end well for her at all, man. So basically, Zeus, he's like, okay, I'll show you my true divine form, right? And so he sheds all of his presentments, all of his garments, all of his things that shelter the human psyche from shattering, from coming in contact with a true God form, right? And basically, the light, the effervescent light that Zeus puts out, basically cooked her and fried her and turned her into dust. Right, but the baby Dionysus, because it was the demigod, right? It had lived. So Zeus picks up this baby Dionysus and sews him into his thigh, right? And gestates the baby inside of his thigh. And so Dionysus is the first one that is born again, or twice born, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So Dionysus grows up and ends up involved in all, again, we're talking about these oracles that are to the mother goddess and to Zeus, Rhea, Cybele. And so Dionysus, basically, they say Dionysus carried Attis away, is how they phrase it. But it's basically the Attis worship moving into Greece in the form of Dionysus and in the form of Bacchus. And with Attis, again, back to the idea that he had that frenzied state where he demasculates himself, right? And then you have Dionysus, that the whole mystery process is about divine madness. And, Dionysus would make this blue honey and dip his thyrsus in it, and then they would anoint the initiates. And the Dionysus had what he called the Maenads, which were these women that would get into an ecstatic state of frenzy, all of them.
Dionysus is the same as, you just said the name.
Attis.
Yeah. So you had Attis worship, and then Dionysus comes about, and then that pushes out Attis, and it becomes Dionysus.
Attis is behind this. I think what really happened, and I'm finding more and more things to confirm.
And we're still in Greece.
Now we're coming from, because Phrygia is right across the water, from Greece. So you start to get these, because of the trade going on, because of the military
This
actions,
is the Hellenization of the area.
It's
right?
Pre-Hellenization.
It's pre-Hellenization.
Right. Hellenization
is into Rome.
Is into Rome with Constantine's mother, Helen.
Okay.
Right. But this is basically bringing in this mother god, and as these sacred temple builders are coming, across the water into Greece, that basically facilitates the ruins we now see as the Grecian ruins, as far as on the hill, and the structure, as far as the proportions of the base, the proportions of the pillars, the proportion of the top, and how it would sit. All those were based on sacred numbers, so they're building almost like a geometric, very much like the Ark of the Covenant was built around these sacred numbers. They're building this temple for the purpose of touching or communicating with the divine. And a lot of times they're building these temples on ley lines, where there's energetic kind of, they call them the dragon currents in the
Didn't
east.
they do the same thing with some of the pyramids too?
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Or all of them?
Yeah. So they're building them on these sacred, energetic lines of the earth that, are bringing energy to certain, almost like a, what's it called, where you get the pins put in you. Acupuncture. So these are almost like acupuncture points on the earth. These are the meridians that when they're doing acupuncture, they put that into a certain nerve to basically inhibit or redirect the flow of the energy in order to be able to ease your pains or, encourage circulation, depending on what the acupuncture is for, right? Well, you got to think these sacred temple builders that were in these divine ecstatic states that were communicating with these entities from the underworld, the overworld. Are these the energies of the fallen angels that are trapped in the earth? So like when we get to the oracles of Apollo, you see Apollo is in the bottomless pit in the end of the of Revelations, right? And again, Revelations within the Bible is another one of these prophetic devices, just like Elijah when he would roam through. As they were roaming, Elijah was a prophet. He was giving these prophecies, and so this idea of prophecy reaches deep within Judaism, within Christianity, within all these ancient Phrygian and Egyptian and Grecian, and it's kind of all culminated and been brought up into modernity, really. Mm-hmm. Especially when you start looking at like Larry Ellison and the Oracle, as far as the internet.
I don't know who Larry Ellison is.
Look up Larry Ellison and Oracle. So he's the guy that was just with Trump, talking about setting up all these server banks to be able to basically create the panopticon.
Panopticon?
The panopticon. Yeah.
That's another one I haven't heard of.
Yeah. So, look up panopticon, man. This is...
So Larry Ellison is a businessman who co-founded Oracle Corporation.
Right.
A prison design that allows a single guard to observe all prisoners without them knowing if they are being watched. And the network banks. So basically 15-minute cities, is that what you're getting at?
Well, not necessarily 15-minute cities, but just the structure of the technocracy and how we're basically being put into a situation where we don't know if we're being watched or not, which causes everyone to self-edit. And then now go back and look up what Oracle does as far as, they're linked in with intelligence and, you can get into this idea that they're kind of,
computer technology company
right.
Headquartered Austin, Texas, co-founded in 1977, Santa Clara, California, by Larry Ellison. He remains the chairman of Oracle. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. But I'd have to look specifically, but there's tons of intelligence money involved in the founding of that. Richard Grove has a whole history on it on his Grand Theft World.
The name also drew from the code name of a 1977 Central Intelligence Agency project, which was also Oracle's first customer. At this stage, Bob Miner served as the company's senior programmer. On March 12, 1986, the company had its initial public offering.
So, yeah, basically their first client was...
The CIA.
The CIA, yeah. But,
they acquired PeopleSoft in 2005, Cybele in 2006, a CRM company.
Sounds very Cabelli.
Yeah. BAA Systems in 2008, And Sun Microsystems, a computer hardware and software company.
So now they're talking
Java programming.
Java, yeah. So now they're talking about making this this basically super AI running on all these server banks, and they're talking about making CRISPR engineered vaccines customized for the individual. But yeah, so I'm probably gonna have to edit this part out and move it to the end.
Yeah,
because we got more to go through on the different types of oracles.
What is Project Oracle? Let's see. Oh, look, a document. The Oracle Mass Storage System.
Yep.
There were 4 areas discussed in detail that we felt were not being properly designed. We asked Blank to tell us clearly what they were doing. How many pages is this? 21 pages. Storage control processors, assessing transport drivers, hardware design.
But when you get into all of this Oracle type stuff with modern computer technology, there was a story in one of the major papers where they were talking about basically they had giant server banks somewhere in Utah, I believe it was, that they were using the Colorado River water
to keep cool
but they have a simulacra of every single person and their patterns based upon all the data that they scrape from the internet and all of our use with our devices.
Yep. Rewards cards.
Right. And so basically they're running game theory on individuals inside of a virtual world that consists of all of our personalities that they know, whatever they know about us based upon all this information they've been gathering, so that they can estimate what we're going to do, how we're going to act in regard to future planning.
Mm-hmm.
So, say they're going to introduce, a certain thing, they run that as a bubble through these test simulations to kind of see how those personalities are going to react as a whole, as, a population, so basically,
So this is pretty much the start of the NSA storage banks.
Yes, very much. So, and when you get down to the idea that they can take all that information and run game theory on it and then get ahead of the train as the train is moving. So, as politics shifts and adjusts, the potential of making corrections in real time using this Oracle system is kind of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're basically creating a modern day digital Oracle through these AI and simulacra populations that they're keeping and running. Very much like, about the Mount Weather conspiracy.
No.
So Mount Weather, I believe it's in Kentucky. This is from Behold a Pale Horse and William Cooper, but he talks about the idea that there's a parallel government that already has a new constitution written, and that basically, they could just switch them out at some point during a time of chaos.
That would make sense. That would exist.
You have to wonder.
It was a week after 9/11 that the Patriot Act was introduced.
Yep.
So it was all written. They just
that was hip high legislation. So that I believe Joe Biden was involved in writing some of that.
I'm sure he was.
So, yeah.
2001.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, even if you go back into Chinese oracles, some of the oldest oracles we know about, they were taking turtle shells and throwing them in fires to see which way they would crack. And then based upon the cracks in the shell, into the different quadrants and sectors, they all had different meanings. The way that it cracked, it would give you a certain oracle, right? Very similar to, have we talked about the language of the birds?
I don't think so.
So
I know a lot of this that we have talked about all of this multiple times.
Right.
And this time around, It seems like I'm starting to be able to figure out
what
we're talking about.
Yeah. It's a deep subject, man.
Yeah.
But it's the history. It's the history of humanity.
Yeah.
So another type of oracle that they would have. Let's see. For a while I was when you get into the Bible, and Laban, when Joseph went to stay with Laban before he married Rebekah. You familiar with that story yet?
Yeah. I was just reading that not too long ago.
And the goats, and he separates out the spotted goats from the solid color goats,
because that's how he gets paid.
That's how he gets paid, but he knows how to breed them so that they'll produce more spotted goats than regular goats. So when he takes his payment, he gets more goats than Laban gets.
Yeah,
because Laban had
didn't that cost him another
messed him over?
Yeah, that cost him another 7 years.
Yeah. Well, you get into the Hebrew text, and they say the first 7 years, and then they ended up making him work another 7 days or 7 months. I think it was.
No, I thought it was 7 more years.
Because he was so upset. Well, that's what it says in the Bible. But in the rabbinical, in the Hebrew text, it says that the first 7 was 7 years, and the second 7 was, I think, 7 weeks or 7 months. Because he was so upset, he wasn't going to stay that long, and he kind of really caused a problem with it all. Mm-hmm. Because they totally tricked him.
Yeah, they did.
Into thinking that the younger sister was Rebekah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You gave him the ugly one, is that right?
Well, not the young, but that was the custom, was to marry the youngest off first.
Oh, that's right.
So you go, and then you go up the line.
But he didn't like her at all.
No, but he got her.
Yeah.
He still, ended up with her as one of his wives. I mean, I think he did end up liking her, with all the story. If you get into
then something happened to Rebekah. She dies, right?
Yeah, there was a lot. Well, she was barren. She couldn't produce any children.
That's right.
And so she gave him, she authorized him to basically have coitus with the maidservant
and the sister.
And well, the sister was already his wife, but as far as the maid servants, and some of the 12 tribes of Israel came from the maid servants, and some of the 12 tribes of Israel came from the wives, and it was actually Rebekah that conceived last.
It was Joseph, right?
Joseph was.
There was one more after that.
Yeah, you're getting down. Yeah, it's a little bit later. Was that Joseph and Rebekah? Or not? Who was Rebekah married to? Let's look that up.
Jacob.
So Jacob was the one that became Israel.
No, wait. Isaac. She's married to Jacob and Esau.
Right.
But Jacob goes and marries. Who's Jacob's wife? Rachel and Leah. Right. Jacob had 2 wives. Those are the 2 sisters.
Right.
So Rachel was Joseph's mom, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Rachel was Joseph's mom because he was one of the...
Yeah, so she was the barren one, wasn't she?
Right. Rachel was the barren one.
Yeah, so it was Jacob.
So when Jacob went to Rachel, right, Rachel was the barren one. But Jacob, in his whole dealing with Laban, in order to marry Rachel, Laban, the father of Rachel, was communicating with a teraphim.
A teraphim?
A teraphim. And there's different definitions of teraphim.
And this isn't in the Bible, though.
This is in the Bible.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Yep. So basically, he's communicating with this teraphim, and the teraphim is telling him, just tell him whatever he wants. He's going to be bountiful because his God gives good blessings on him. So, you want him around here because he's going to bring the good luck and the will of his God with him.
They spelled that wrong. So it was a different entity. So
So he's communicating with this teraphim that's basically giving him prophecy in order to how to wrangle Jacob in to get him to work, so that Laban can benefit, But now these teraphim, at the base, it was a piece of something natural with a piece of metal attached or wrapped around it, right? So it's a piece of technology of sorts, right? Because it has the aspect of the wire or the metallic function, and also it has the link to the natural world, right? And sometimes these would be statues. Sometimes they would be even to the point that when you get into the Persian teraphim, they were actually using human heads as mechanisms for prophecy, right? So when you see in the Bible, what was their name? Semiramis doing the sexy dance for the king, and the king says, well, what do you want? And she says, I want the head of John the Baptist on a silver platter, right? So that was the thing with these teraphims. They would actually put the head on a silver or a copper charging plate, right? And there was a whole process where they would pull the tongue out and tattoo incantations on the tongue, and then there would be sacrifices, and they would basically bring in these energies and communicate with them. And this isn't necessarily what Laban was doing. This is more in Persia. But Laban, nonetheless, he's communicating with this entity through this teraphim, this device that, and some even speculate that the Ark of the Covenant itself is a sort of a teraphim, right? But those heads, those talking oracular heads, like John the Baptist's head, it said that once they got them talking, they would basically glutterally answer all the questions you wanted, and when you were done with them and walk away from them, they would just howl all night until the sun came up, when they were fully possessed, right? So you have these teraphim, and even when you look at Jesus on the cross, right, and it talks about they were drawing lots at the base of the cross while Jesus was dying. That was a process. Drawing lots, yeah. Some people have related it to shooting dice, right, which used to be used for divination before they became a game. Right, but generally drawing lots is associated with a case that is it's a spit of arrows, and the arrows would be wrapped in gold or silver or different things, and each the arrows had a different meaning, and so basically you'd shake the case of arrows, and then you draw one. You draw the lot. You draw one out. And that would give you some insight into some sort of question you were asking. So you'd ask a question, and then you draw the arrow.
Magic 8-ball.
Very much along the same lines, So
this was going on
at the crucifixion of Jesus, at the base of the cross,
and that's related to Terra.
Well, it's again connecting into these energies for the purpose of divination.
Okay, divination as what do you mean by divination?
Well, very much like how they were using these oracles to divine things. These are other ways that they were using for divination.
Okay, because
people are always. I think we inherently want to think that we have some
control
aspect of viewing into the unknown, which is why people go and get their tarot cards read, which is why people go and get their palms read.
Yeah.
These different things, or even with the Ouija board.
Yeah.
Where, they're basically turning this connection into these energies beyond
Horoscopes.
the veil. Well, and horoscopes as well are another form of divining, because you say, oh, well, look at how these planets are at certain angles, and this leads to believing this function or that function. So again, the zodiac as well. When you read your zodiac in the Sunday paper, or if you got the zodiac app now. But I used to always love as a kid, when the Sunday paper was there, I would always look up Scorpio and read my little horoscope. I remember doing it when I was 4 or 5 years old, man. And it's so I think just it's an inherent function within people to want to be able to kind of gain some understanding of the future, so that hopefully they can, maybe have a little more control over fate or fata, or lending to the idea of, but that's the whole thing, are they telling you that you're bound in this way, or are you actually learning something? Is it binding you, or is it loosing you?
Is it showing you what to look for?
Right. But by even hearing it, does it bind you?
Because now you're going to be...
Now you have a certain expectation of what reality should be.
Yeah.
Because you have these Roman emperors that they would go to the oracle before a war, or before, they were going to plow the fields, and basically they'd be like, are we going to win the war? And, the oracle, and that's
I wonder what happens when they're told no.
Right.
If they perform differently, or if they try harder.
Well, they wouldn't attack.
They just wouldn't attack.
They wouldn't attack. So, but there was several times where the oracle, because within the Sibylline oracles specifically, they would come back in what they call hexameter, which is a form of poetry. Right, that's in certain number. There's a certain number of words per certain number of lines. So basically, if it didn't come in that Greek hexameter form, then they were like, "This is a fake prophecy. This is from a spirit that's trying to fool us."
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was one of the ways that they had to be able to tell that they were communicating with the right entity. But there was several cases where different emperors, one of the ones, they said you will die in your homeland, something, and so he went out on quest. He's like, as long as I'm not at home, they can't kill me, right? So he ends up dying in this little tiny town that has the same name that his town has.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, it kind of threw him a loop, So there's several times where you see, and these oracles, they seem to be really kind of trickster kind of entities. And when you read,
what do you think the entities are?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is it the human psyche? Is it just us getting in touch with ourselves, or is it an actual spirit that's locked in the earth that somehow they're making a connection with? That's a very good question.
One of the false gods that you're not supposed to be worshiping. Yeah.
In accordance with biblical function. Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of things on X with people talking about mediums and how you shouldn't listen to mediums because these are religious people, Christians.
Oh yeah.
That they're basically the spirits, or the Nephilim, or
the demonic forces.
Yeah, the demons.
Yep,
and that's why you shouldn't listen to them. They're deceivers.
Right.
Ever since I've really heard that, and over the last couple of years, it's made me rethink psychics.
Well, but that's again, there's also in the Bible talk of psychics, but the Bible also says the stars will show you the time.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some justified aspect of reading zodiacs in the Bible. There are, but the teraphim, at a certain point, the Jewish rabbis strictly forbid them.
Really?
And they said no more teraphim.
Wait.
In
movies and stuff where you see people shaking bones,
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's divination. Yeah. That's a voodoo kind of voodoo kind of African root magic kind of thing, the reading of the bones. And then you have, reading of the tea leaves. You have and all of these, and you have the scrying, which John Dee, Queen Elizabeth's magician, he had this hematite stone that came from the Mayans that they brought back from when Cortez went, and basically they started looting all the gold from South America and bringing it to, and then all that gold ended up going to China and trade for silks and porcelains. And it got to the point where there was hardly any metals in Europe, and people were having to melt down their silverware. And like, this is the time of, when Richard the Lionheart was going to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land, which he never saw. I think he saw it, but he never entered it. He had to go home because the Saracens had completely taken it at that point. But like during the time when, Guinevere and Robin Hood and all that, like, they were melting down their silverware to pay their taxes, because all of the metals that had flowed into Europe had been redistributed to Asia because of the want of these luxurious items, But yeah, so you constantly see these oracles coming about, of people trying to gain prophecy, trying to have a deeper understanding so that they can maybe be prepared for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's see if I can find a good story in here. Yeah, so now looking at biblical and Hebrew history, these talking heads fall into the category of a teraphim, which was classed as an illicit or invariable type of oracle. And so talking to these teraphim, right, was seen to be in the same categories as orniomancy, which is using dreams to predict the future, and necromancy, being communicating with the dead to tell the future. Let's see. Now, the teraphim, right, basically has the root word of raphim, right, which in the context of the Old Testament means the terrible ones. These are the offspring of the fallen ones, right, after they had bred down. Let's see. In poetic literature, these raphim are the departed spirits living in Sheol, the ghosts of the dead. They have ties with the serpent symbol of Serapis, being Osiris in limbo, as well as being related to Manes, being the spirit of the dead.
So would they be the same? Like, if they're the offspring of the fallen ones, mm-hmm. then after the flood, they'd be the spirits that were
trapped in the earth.
Yeah.
And let's see. It says these Manes, being the spirit of the dead, right, reside under the earth, who were honored by graveside sacrifices and quenched with blood. In rabbinical lore, they are. They call them the disgraceful things, right? And they required secret preparations known only to the great arahats, and can use both alive and dead things, being classed generally as idols, but they were not idols, right? In Russian lore, they are called the teraphim of the earth, and the subtle and fiery realm, and can be used to send psychic transmissions. So, these are some very interesting things that they're using these these various forms of divination for,
Now, where are you reading about, like, what are you pulling those notes from when you're looking this up?
So many different books. So when I find these little nuggets, I basically drop them on a certain pile of notes, and then when I'm compiling on a certain subject, then I basically draw from those notes.
Now, is this any of this relating to the chapter that you're working on right now? You've been working on the notes for the Addis chapter?
The divination thing is actually going into the next book I'm working on.
Which I was going to ask as well.
Which is going to be about
the notes that start another
book. Yeah. So this is going to be the mother of all gods.
So Addis and Kybele.
It's going to be about Kybele, yeah.
Kybele.
Ishtar, Nana, Kybele, Isis.
So your first book is basically Nimrod and where he shows up in all these different civilizations,
right?
And now this next book is expanding on that,
and it's going to be the mother of the gods, of all the gods.
Okay,
yeah,
nice.
So it's a lot of deep, interesting, weird subject matter,
Yeah, but if you're mapping it out like you are,
yeah,
it's going to be a really I imagine it's going to be a really good book. So your books, the Skinwalker book, goes over Nimrod and all these different elements, so right. It's going to give you everybody a wider understanding of who this character is,
right?
Yeah, and then now you're basically covering the whole family,
the other
tree.
Side of the coin.
Yeah.
So you got the male personification, and then this one will be the female personification.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, let's see some of the other notes I have here. In heresies, Alexander H. Jopp calls them the nourished one. And these teraphim, they would basically pull them out every day and oil them and polish them to keep them working, right? So, you figure it's some sort of a piece of nature, usually a piece of wood, that has a wire wrapped around it. And when you see all these videos on Twitter and Instagram about them taking wires and basically wrapping them in certain ways and sticking them in the ground, and it's supposed to make the plants grow better. You have these guys that are making these where they wrap it's like a epoxy full of gems and minerals inside, and they wrap it with copper wire, and it's supposed to make like a torsion field, so there's something in regard to this natural substance, like the crystals wrapped with wire.
I was just going to mention that because you're always out on the road on all these. I'm sure you see tons of that.
Tons of wire wraps. It's and what was it for my wife's anniversary? I got her a nice wire wrap, and it's got gems, and it's got a piece of ivory in it. It's got
the superstition aspect of it. It makes me think of rabbit's foot.
A rabbit's foot, yeah. Where I guess is more along the idea of you're trying to harvest good luck and carry it with you. Very much like the horseshoe, how you hang it so that it's upwards so that it will hold the luck. If you put it upside down, all the luck falls out. And
but are the terraforms the opposite of luck?
Well, the teraphim, you're actually using it to communicate.
Okay.
With some sort of a
entity,
psyche. Yeah. Some sort of, whether it's your own psyche or whether it's, one of these entities that's locked in the earth, yeah. So, let's see now these teraphim, so we got that part. Let's see. So author Yuri, in his research, and this is Persian, he says the active... go ahead.
So would a medium basically be a human form of a teraphim? Teraphim? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, teraphim.
Teraphim.
Yeah.
So medium, essentially.
A medium would be but that's the whole thing. These different prophets and prophetesses at these different temples, you almost have to think they were mediums.
Yeah.
Of the time, when you get into the prophetess of Delphi, which is the one where we talked about the rock after Saturn spit it up. This is where it came down. She would actually, and it was found by these shepherds that had their goats there, and the goats somehow they breathed in these volcanic fumes coming out of this cave, and they all jumped up on two legs and started dancing. So
the goats?
Yeah, so he had a whole herd of goats that were all in the field standing on 2 feet dancing, right? So they brought the priests in, and they're like, oh, this is, sacred place, and basically they set up the Oracle of Delphi there, right? And so the Oracle of Delphi, as a medium, as a person that gives prophecy, right? She would go into the cave, and they would have a tripod, and it was like a 3-legged brass tripod, right? And she would sit on top of that tripod right over a crack in the earth, right? And this is a volcanic vent, right? But they thought that when Horus slays Set in Egypt, right? There's this whole story of Set being Typhoon being this dragon being this python, that basically this python that was Set was slayed here. And basically it was rotting inside the earth. And those fumes they believed it was the fumes from the rotting python. And the python was considered as a wisdom symbol, right? They believed snakes, that's why within the mystery schools, the snakes are seen as a divine animal because they glide across the ground. They don't have to walk, right? They shed their skin every year and become anew. So it's this idea of rebirth, right? And so, you have what was it? Mercury, Hermes, essentially, that has the caduceus. That's the stick with the 2 snakes on it, right? Mm-hmm. And between those 2 snakes, it's you're making like snake oil almost. You're making this energy that basically you can use as a magical force, right? With Asclepius, who was the healer of the gods, he had a staff, and a python would crawl up the staff and whisper the cures that he needed to distribute to the people that were suffering.
And that's just with 1 snake. The other one's 2 snakes.
2 snakes.
And the 2 snakes, didn't you say before that that's a sign of commerce?
More a sign of commerce, whereas the 1 snake is the sign of healing,
Yeah.
So the serpent's always been seen as this wisdom kind of symbol, right? So as this python is rotting in the earth, it being actually the volcanic vent, right? The priestess of the oracle would sit on top of that tripod, and she would have a acacia branch in one hand, and what would she have? It seems like sometimes it was a drink, sometimes it was a scroll, but nonetheless, you'd have different symbols in each hand. So she would have different symbols in each hand, and she would breathe in these fumes and go into an ecstatic state, and then start to, what's your question? The emperor would have a question. So they would basically ask her the question, and then they would have like these lower level people that didn't understand, that weren't priests or anything, but they had a couple of them that were in charge of writing down everything she said, right? And then they would take those, and the priest would basically interpret them, right? So that was the way they were using that divination method,
Mm-hmm.
So versus these oracular talking heads, where they're bringing these spirits into the heads and basically trapping them in order to gain information from
And they did that with John the Baptist.
A lot of people suspect so, because when you trace John the Baptist's head, John the Baptist ends up in the possession of the Knights Templar.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's actually in the Vatican Museum right
His
now.
head?
Yeah, John the Baptist's head. And it's called, the number is, what is it, 23, not 23 kaput. I forgot what it's called. You'll have to look it up. But there's a number associated with John the Baptist's head, and it's a number and some letters.
Says it is not in the Vatican, but it is on display at the Church of San Silvestro in
Cappadocia.
Capite in Rome.
Capite. Now, there's actually like 4 or 5 heads of John the Baptist.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, so let's see if we can find the listing of what it's called number-wise.
That's crazy. There's a picture of it and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. Is that the silver platter right there?
That looks like a silver platter to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. It looks like there's 12 gems around on that platter, and then there's one big one at the bottom.
So 13.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, but it was believed that that the Templars were using the head of John the Baptist as an oracular head to basically get information. Is one of the
Is there anything written about what information they've got?
No.
No.
So, but that's speculation.
Right.
So just from the fact that she wanted the head on a platter, the fact that, and even when you look at like Skull and Bones, in Yale University in Connecticut, they have the skull of Geronimo.
Yeah.
And they have the.
They drink out of it, right?
Yeah, they had look that up. They have 3 skulls, man. And one of them's of a former president as well. I want to say like Hubert Humphrey or something like that. It's in the Anthony Sutton book.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. So if it's not online, it may not be online.
It's going to be tough to find, it looks like.
Yeah. So yeah, and you got to wonder, are Skull and Bones using these skulls for oracular purposes? Because when you take the skull, you also there's a big belief, like Odin rides around with these skulls, not these skulls, but these severed heads, basically on his saddle. Hanging from his saddle, because he uses them for oracular purposes.
Well, you'll be happy to know that the Geronimo story is just a legend.
Just a legend. There's pictures of it. There's bonesmen talking about it. But of course, it is, it's just a legend.
2009, Geronimo's descendants sued Yale University.
Yep. Now, why would they do that if it's just a legend?
Right. In 1918, the members dug up Geronimo's grave at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. What year did he die? Did he live?
He went to the 1910 World's Fair, and he was signing autographs for a penny.
So he wasn't gone for too long when they dug him up.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah. So you figure in 1910, Geronimo, from the Native American colonialist wars, was still alive and went to the World's Fair and was signing autographs for a penny. Because he had no other way to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
But he was one of the greatest warriors that existed within, those peoples at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I wish I had that Anthony Sutton book here, because, he actually is gone, he had access to the archives. I mean,
what's the name of his book?
An Introduction to America's Secret Society, I think. And it's just called Skull and Bones. So
that's the name of the book, Skull and Bones?
Skull and Bones by Anthony. And he's the same writer that wrote Hitler and Wall Street and he's the same one that wrote The Bolsheviks in Wall Street, and basically traces all the funds down and shows how and who and names of.
I've never read those books.
Yeah, Anthony C. Sutton, but he was actually in with the elite, and they let him have access to their archives. And then once he started writing about this stuff, he got kicked out. His publisher quit publishing his books, and he kind of became exiled. So,
For writing about conspiracy theories.
Yep.
Who's the other one? Carol Quigley?
Carol Quigley, yeah. Well, he was a professor at Georgetown University that was the mentor of Bill Clinton. So he was a professor, and he agreed.
He was Bill Clinton's mentor?
Yeah, he was Bill Clinton's mentor.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
And he wrote Tragedy and Hope.
And
And that book's like 1,500 pages long, right?
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
I've listened to Tragedy and Hope 101.
Right.
That's Richard Grove, right?
Richard Grove, yeah.
Yeah.
So here we go. In BC 620, teraphims were banned by Hebrew prophets. And in the Bible, in several places, we see their use. In Ezekiel 21, the king of Babylon, wishing for guidance, consults a teraphim regarding the route of an expedition. In Arabic cultures, we talked about the arrows that you take and shake and draw lots. Let's see. So in Jude 18, you have the traveling Danites, which learn that Micah had a teraphim, and they immediately wish to consult the oracle. And that's in Jude 18 and Jude 17. Because Micah actually had built a private chapel with an ephod and a teraphim. The ephod is the priestly garment, or it could be a large statue of the arrows where you draw lots as well. But let's see. So they a teraphim within the Bible, right? They're often called a graven or a molten image.
Oh.
Yeah. Now there is there it is right there. Kaput 58 is the John the Baptist catalog number.
Kaput 58?
Kaput, CAPUT. And then LVIIIQ.
Wait, say that again.
LV.
Wait, what's the number after kaput?
Oh, well, yeah, this is the number in Roman numerals.
Oh.
Yeah, so LVIIIQ.
Book by Pascal Uceda Piqueras, a chapter in Tertullian's A Treatise on the Soul.
Put John the Baptist after that number and see if that does anything.
The head of John the Baptist.
But it's not giving you the head 58 or the kaput 58. Kaput means head.
Huh.
And then it's number 50. So the Vatican, and so let's see, it's kaput 58 in the Vatican archives, which was in possession of the Knights Templar. So the fact that this is head 58 tells you there's at least 57 other heads that the church has.
And I bet he's not the last one either.
Oh, I bet. But the thing is, so when they're opening up all these churches, right, and getting into root magic and sympathetic magic, and for every single church that the Catholic Church would open, they would have a department that would basically send a piece of a saint or a piece of a prophet to the different churches. So every single church in Europe, and if it's a Roman Catholic Church in the United States, has a piece of a saint under the altar.
Could it be like a possession of theirs too, though? Like
usually it was
article of
a
clothing?
bone or a hair or like you saw the John the Baptist with the platter at the whatever basilica it was, So
that's what they got. That's what they got.
You should look up the preserved Mary Magdalene. That's a good one. That's so, here I have also, which is said to be now have been moved to San Silvestro in a museum shrine inside the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, Syria.
The skull of Mary Magdalene can be found in the south of France in the once Gallo-Roman town of Villa-Lata or Tugalata, which after the death of Maximum, one of Jesus' 72 disciples, became Saint Maxim la Sainte Baume. The skull of Mary Magdalene rests most of the year in the crypt of Basilique Sainte Marie Madeleine, a massive Gothic basilica whose construction began in 1295 under Charles II of Anjou, King of Naples, Count of Provence, and nephew of Saint Louis, King of France.
Now, that's the same Saint Louis that was working and passing out all the ducats in France to exasperate the French Revolution.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. That's weird. They got hair going around it, too.
Yeah, so now get this. The head of John the Baptist, right? Many people at the time, when they found out that they had the head, there's references to it as well, I believe, in the Templar documents of them calling it Baphomet.
Baphomet?
Yeah.
Wow.
The head of John the Baptist.
Why?
It's a good question. So, it's...
So what you're saying is they were using it as a... What do you call it?
An oracle.
An oracle.
Potentially.
So they're trying to communicate through it, and then they call it Baphomet? Ooh.
I know. So, now I have this other story here. Let's see.
Mary Magdalene's remains were found intact except for her jawbone, and the dust inside the tomb was a wooden tablet written in wax. Also found in her tomb was Saint Ampoule, a glass sphere containing earth soaked with blood of Jesus Christ collected by Mary Magdalene at the foot of the cross.
Right.
Mary Magdalene's jawbone had been sent to Rome after a previous excavation of her tomb and before the Saracen invasion of 710 AD, when all important relics in France were hidden. In Rome, Mary Magdalene's jawbone had been venerated for centuries. With the news of the 1279 discovery, Pope Boniface VIII returned the jawbone to Saint Maximum le Saint Baume, and on April 6, 1295, it was reunited with the skull of Mary Magdalene. The Pope then published the pontifical bull for the establishment of the Dominicans of Saint Baume and Saint Maximum. The Dominicans chose Mary Magdalene as co-patroness of their order of preachers. So they found a tomb of Mary Magdalene. I never knew that.
Yeah. So
that's what this says.
Yeah. So basically, this is where they venerate her, and the way that they tie the church to the divine is by having the skull.
Wow.
Right. So
Nole me tangere, meaning touch me not, is the Latin version of words spoken, according to John, by Jesus to Mary Magdalene when she recognized him after his resurrection. Touch me not.
Because it would pollute his spirit body. Nobody was allowed to touch him at all. So now within the Afghani culture, right, Idris Shah, a Sufi teacher, argues that the Baphomet head is really the head of a mystic named Hallaj, who is revered by the Sufi sect. And the mystic Hallaj was executed for telling about his spiritual experiences. After his decapitation, the caliph's queen mother had the head embalmed, trading hands eventually coming into the possession of certain Sufi masters who revered it for its magical powers of prophecy. This Hallaj, this person whose head it was, this mystic, was said to be a widow's son, just like Horus. And Idris Shah believes not only was this head the Baphomet, but that he was also the model for Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's temple. So this is coming from Afghani mysticism. So regarding the head of John the Baptist, right?
The Knights Templar are often accused of having venerated John the Baptist above Jesus Christ, that they regarded him as the Messiah and not the Son of God as described in the Gospels.
Right. The Knights Templar were very much a follower of John the Baptist. So here, let me read this right here by Albert Pike.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Albert Pike?
Yeah, Albert Pike, who, you know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as writing Morals and Dogma for the Freemasons, right? Albert Pike, in 1871, the Scottish Rite Freemason, in his Morals and Dogma, says, and so the Johannonites, right, are the followers of John the Baptist, right? He says, the Johannonites ascribe to St. John the foundation of their secret church in a line of pontiffs handed down from St. John in uninterrupted succession. Yeah. So the pontiff of Theoset initiated Hughes de Payne into the mysteries. Thus, the order of the Knights Templar, at its very origin, was devoted to the cause against Rome and the crowns of kings. The Knights Templar followed a secret Johannonite doctrine revering John the Baptist over Jesus, while the Mandeans also claimed John the Baptist as the true prophet. Yeah. So the Knights Templar were a sect of Jonanites, or believing that John the Baptist was the true Messiah.
I never knew that before.
Yeah. So that's a interest, and the fact that they were using this head of John the Baptist, they at least had it as a preserved relic. To link them to John the Baptist. But there is, like I said, speculation they were using it for an oracular head to be able to communicate.
Wild.
Yeah.
And there's nothing documented about anything that came about it?
Other than it was in their possession, and that I believe in the Templar manuscripts, there's places where they refer to it as the Baphomet. So, yeah. So, now, let's see, there's a legend of a Teutonic Templar who was the Lord of Sidon, and who was in love with Yse, Y-S-E. A lot of people believe that this is Isis, right? And Isis had died suddenly. And on her burial, the knight dug her up and copulated with the body, right? And then 9 months later, this Lord of Sidon, basically he hears a disembodied voice from the void, right? That told him to return to the gravesite of Yse. And when he returned, he found a severed head sitting atop two thigh bones, which is the symbol of the skull and bones.
Yeah.
Right. And this head, he labeled it as his son, right? And basically, he was told to guard this head as it would be the giver of all things, as an oracle. And he guarded it the rest of his days, and it protected him. And later, when it came into the possession of the Knights Templar, it was incorporated into their rights. And here's a little thing from Zechariah. It says, "The teraphim have spoken vainly, and the diviners have seen a lie." Now
this all comes from being taught to the mystery schools too.
Well, it comes from a long-standing tradition of using these oracles in a religious type holy setting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it just keeps
metastasizing into different forms of use, Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So,
how many heads does the Vatican have? Like, how many?
At least 58.
He had 72 apostles, right? Is it? No, not apostles.
Who's that?
Jesus.
Jesus had 13. Well, 12, and he was the 13. Yeah.
We just read 72, right?
Oh, apostles. Oh, maybe apostles. I'm thinking, maybe there was 72 apostles when you get into the Apostles' Creed, and that would make sense. They would use a number like 72.
Of course it does.
Yeah. So now in 50 BC, the poet Virgil was believed to be a medieval sorcerer who is said to have created his own oracular talking head in Gouttiere de Metz. Let's see, and it's basically in this book called Image of the World from 1245. They said he made a head of brass. And that was the other thing, the Sibylline Oracle was used to propagate the idea that Alexander the Great was some sort of a god king on earth. Like, some say they went back and fabricated the prophecies that basically, described his life and how he was born, and that he was a divine being on earth. So it was used, and I think it was Alexander the Caesar that and at one point, once the popehood is developed and everything, right, the pope basically goes out of his way to gather all of the prophecies of all the different Sibyls, right, and he basically determines which ones are real and which ones are fake. And then he burns all the ones that he thinks are fake, and the Vatican keeps all the ones that are real, right? And what's funny is, have you heard about this recent thing about the lady?
No.
This is in the whole context of UFO culture, but there's one of the researchers said he's been in touch with the lady, and basically relates her to these different appearances of a divine mother that's given prophecy. What was the case down in South America with the prophecy of, and the little girl saw it, and how come I can't think of the name of it? But the Vatican, basically, the Vatican is supposed to release these secrets. And they released the first two, but then they never released the final one. The Fatima, Our Lady of Fatima. I'm pretty sure it's Lady of Fatima prophecy.
It's about the Virgin Mary appearing to 3 shepherd children in Portugal in 1917. The children reported that she gave them the message of prayer, peace, and penance. The Roman Catholic Church officially recognized the events as authentic in 1930. Third and last prophecy.
That they never would release.
The third secret of Fatima is a vision of an angel with a flaming sword and a vision of the prosecution of Christians. The secret was revealed in 2000.
Oh, was it? I didn't think they ever released that third prophecy.
I want to see about this third prophecy. The third secret was revealed to the children at the Cova on July 3rd, 1917. It was to be kept in the greatest confidence. When Sister Lucia was with the Dorothean sisters of Toy, Spain, she fell ill in mid-1943 because it was feared that she could die before the third secret was revealed by her. The Bishop of Laria requested that she write down the remainder of the secret or third secret, told to the children in 1917. Obediently, in the midst of her painful sickness, Sister Lucia wrote it down on a single sheet of paper. She placed it in an envelope and sealed it. Before we look at Sister Lucia's testimony, I offer the words of then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who gives some context to the revelations of Lucia. There was great speculation and controversy over the third secret of Fatima because it was kept under wraps for many years. In the theological commentary, The Message of Fatima, Cardinal Ratzinger points out that the contents of the envelope that held the third secret for so long might be disappointing to some. A careful reading of the text of the so-called Third Secret of Fatima, published here in its entirety long after the fact and by decision of the Holy Father, will probably prove disappointing or surprising after all the speculation that is stirred. Okay, just tell us what it is.
So, but the thing is, when you look at the description of how this happened, and I want to say there was like 50,000 people that all witnessed the same thing, and the sun fell out of the sky, and it's pretty interesting. It's one of the largest, but nonetheless, there's this speculation that this is not necessarily the Virgin Mary, even though the Virgin Mary is one of these personifications of the Mother of the Gods, right?
Well, if it's could it be the horror? Is it the Whore of Babylon in Revelations?
The Whore of Babylon, is that's
different.
Okay. Outside of that's part of a prophecy, versus we're talking about the actual prophecy givers. Right. But there's speculation that Fatima was not necessarily the Virgin Mary, but was this ancient mother of the gods that had come to the children and bringing prophecy, essentially, And
so we're talking about
Kybele. Yeah. So it says the miracle of the sun, witnessed, reported seeing the sun move in unusual ways, including dancing, zigzagging, and turning the sky amethyst-colored.
After the two parts which I have already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand, flashing. It gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire, but they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated toward him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it. A bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Our bishops, priests, men, and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. Afflicted with pain and sorrow, he prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way there died one after another the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross there were two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God.
So what's this?
That's the third secret.
Oh, that's the third secret.
Yeah.
Oh, Fatima. Okay, wow.
Yeah. Almost 14 years later, in a May 1982 letter to John Paul II, Sister Lucia gave an interpretation of the third secret. She wrote, "The third part of the secret refers to Our Lady's words. If not, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated. The third part of the secret is a symbolic revelation referring to this part of the message, conditioned by whether we accept or not that the message itself asks of us. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted, and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world." Well, at the time, they were atheists.
The schism. Well, there's also the Eastern Orthodox in Russia versus the Western Orthodox of Roman Catholicism.
Right.
So I think they're talking about converting the Eastern Orthodox to the West, because there's always been a fight back and forth. So, but when these young girls saw the sun in the sky and this goddess figure came and gave them these prophecies, these secrets, there was 70,000 people that saw this happen.
And when was this? 1917?
This was in October 13th, 1917. So
this is a different one then.
No,
right?
This is the Fatima.
Because I thought that was on July. Oh, yep, October 13th.
13th, yeah. So, but 70...
Between May 13th and October 13th.
Yeah, different sightings.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think three different sightings. But upwards of 70,000 people saw this happening, with the sun moving strangely and the turning the sky to amethyst, and like just all of this, and this, goddess, divine feminine figure coming and giving these revelatory secrets of doom. Oh, very much like Cassandra, back to Cassandra. And all of these prophecies, not all of them. There was some favorable prophecies, but a lot of them were like, it's going to waylace to a third of the people. There would be fire and brimstone and rocks falling from the heavens, and but that was the whole thing. Back to the bringing Mother Kybele, right, from Phrygia to Rome, right? It was the Sibylline prophecy one of the prophecies that basically said, in order to get Hannibal out of Italy, you have to bring the Mother Goddess to the Palatine Hill, and that will make Hannibal leave, right? So they bring this rock from Phrygia. They parade it all the way to Rome, and they set up a temple on Palatine Hill and basically make this the mother of all the gods in Rome, right? And I think it was a few months later, Hannibal packed up all his stuff and left, Italy.
Because of that? Just because they
No, he had to go back to do some stuff, but nonetheless, they attributed it to the goddess, right? And also, by bringing the goddess in, they had bumper crops for like 3 years beyond anybody's expectation. Like everything was just super fertile and vibrant, and because all of a sudden you have an entire nation. They ended up making the worship of Kybele or Kybele one of the state religions. And basically the Senate would appoint the high priest in the temple of Kybele or Kybele, so it goes from this this mystery system interrelated with the Masons, interrelated with the different divine madness cults, and right up to Palatine Hill at the one of the biggest empires ever on earth, and she becomes the mother of all the gods, all the pantheon of Zeus and all the Olympians, and there's actually some stelae, like carved stelae, that depict Cybele taking Attis with her to Mount Olympus, and basically apotheosizing Attis, because he was a mortal man and she was a goddess. And so she basically, after he demasculates himself and makes him a slave to her, which is, I was talking to somebody the other night, and they said this is high left hand tantra. Basically, it's a form of abstaining from sex and pleasure for the sense of ascending, right? But nonetheless, making himself a slave to Cybele, and as far as I can find, this is the first individual that's apotheosized and turned into a god with Mother Cybele when she ascends into the heavens. So, and you have all these different temples that this Attis cult has moved and set up and brought in all of these different, soothsaying prophetesses for the purpose of consulting state, and basically kind of really running the government. And in Athens specifically, right? They said that one of the priests of Attis had come into Athens, right, in Greece, and you figure these were effeminate dressed kind of priestesses. They were demasculated, so and when they came into town and sat down with the women and started teaching the mysteries of Attis, that the men in the town basically took the high priest of Attis and threw him in a pit head first and killed him, right? And then immediately a plague came in and started killing everybody. So they go to the Sibylline prophet, right? And they basically say, what do we need to do to end this plague? And they're like, well, you killed, the representation of my cleric.
Yeah.
So in order to facilitate fixing that, you need to build a temple to Attis in your town center, right? So, and this temple to Attis ended up being where the Athenians housed all of their government records in the temple. So here you have a direct, correlation of the religion taking over the state.
Is it still standing?
What's that?
The Temple of Attis?
Temple, I don't know.
In Greece?
Let's look it up. In Athens, specifically. A lot of this stuff, I just read about it. It's always nice to go and dig the stuff up.
The Artemis Temple in Athens, Greece?
That's more a
Temple
magical goddess.
Temple of Athena Nike?
No, that's a goddess too. It may be gone. It may not be there anymore. Because you figure this is in the beginning. This is way, way, way back in early Grecian history.
I just wonder what it looks like.
Just type in Temple of Attis and see if anything comes up. Not really.
Not really.
So usually see that how it looks like a house almost.
Right here?
Yeah. In early Grecian art, the Phoenicians would actually make these terracotta little like houses that you get that shape with the roof and the sides, and inside of that shape would be the god or representation of Attis.
Look at that.
Yeah. Just
Attis.
like the Statue of
wow.
Liberty, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
Right?
What's on the sides there? Oh, it's not going to show us. I'll have to zoom in. What are they carrying?
Yeah, it's hard to see.
It is.
So, with Addis, I want to say there was, when you relate it into the stars, there was actually 2 of his couriers that hold torches. And one of them they would hold upright at the beginning of the zodiac, and the other one they would hold upside down at the end of the zodiac. So it may have something to do with that. But you got, so generally, how many rays you got there? 5, I think. Generally, there would be 7 divine rays. I think the Statue of Liberty has 7. Maybe 5. But it was the divine rays coming from the heavens that would enter into the head. How many she got?
7.
7, yeah. And that's generally, the 7 is associated, it's a number of the goddess. So
Wild.
yeah. So let's see, did we get to the end of that story? Oh, the skull and crossbones. But you remember how I talked about the skull and crossbones on the grave?
Yeah.
And that knight, that was supposedly the guy that initiated one of the heads of the Knights Templar. But supposedly when the Templars got kicked out of Jerusalem at the end of their 400-year reign or something, when they sailed away on the ship, they had a black flag with the skull with 2 thigh bones. And some say that is the origin of the pirate flag, was the Templars leaving Jerusalem.
I've heard that origin of that flag meant no quarter.
No quarter, right?
So if you saw a ship, I think we talked about it the last time, you saw a ship coming with a pirate, with a skull and crossbones, and
run.
Means, yeah. They're going to kill you.
Yeah.
And then it turned into it was usually a red flag.
Well, but also you got to look at the fact that the Queen basically gave out papers to form the privateers. So the Queen was the one that authorized and issued the first privateer papers that set up the pirates. And they were working for the Queen specifically to pillage the nations that were against England as a form of warfare.
Trade war.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but, and you go from all these different oracles. There's one in here. See, I keep saying one more, because it's fascinating, man. It's just fascinating stuff, Let's see. Oh no, I did. That's the one I wanted to tell you, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Where did it go? Okay, here we go. So in 111 A.D., right? There's this character called Bran the Blessed, and he is a giant of Britain in Welsh mythology, right? And in a war, Bran, the giant, he becomes mortally wounded and tells his fellow soldiers to cut off his head and return it to Britain. And so for 7 years...
Look at this guy.
What do we got here? Oh, yeah, that's Bran.
Ooh.
So that's who we're talking about, Bran the Blessed, right?
Okay.
So basically he gets wounded in war, and it's a mortal wound, and he knows he's going to die. So he's like, cut my head off and just take my head back to Britain, right? So for 7 years, these other survivors are entertained by the head. Bran's head continues to speak. Let's see, what's it say? So in this state, it says he's without perceiving time, and they get lost on the Gwales, a glass home island off Dyfed. And finally, they get back home, right? And the head is silent. But they take the head and they bury the head facing towards France, to ward off the plague and ensure fertility and to protect the city from the invaders on White Hill. And this is believed to be where they built the Tower of London now, is on top of Bran the Blessed's head. And the Tower of London, is basically the jail that many of libertine kind of philosophical people have been thrown in. Voltaire was in the Tower of London for his ideas. Yeah. So, yeah. But it's just, and dude, I got examples going all the way up till now. Just example after example. Let's see. So let's see. In 1125, William of Malmesbury, in his History of the English Kings, he details rumors around Pope Sylvester II, who had traveled to Al-Andalus and stolen a tome of secret knowledge, only escaping with the help of a demonic assistance. From this stash of stolen secret information, he had cast a head of a statue. And with his knowledge of astrology, animated the brazen head. This head was, this head was silent until spoken to, only answering yes or no. So there's your magic 8-ball right there. So, yeah. But there's this whole line through the 11, 12, 1300s of them creating these brazen heads where they would basically cast it out of bronze, and then they would do some sort of magic on it. It said here because of his knowledge of astrology or whatever, and they would bring an entity down into the head and basically ask it questions and communicate with it.
And it's a teraphim.
It's a type of a teraphim, yes.
Teraphim.
Yes. But even
I didn't know that's what you would call something like that.
Yeah, and you see it in the Bible, frequently. But even in Rome, they would cast statues out of bronze, right? And they would leave it hollow, and then they would fill it up with oil.
Yeah.
So that they could call an entity into it, and basically, use it for divination purposes.
What about shrunken heads?
You have to wonder. I haven't looked much into shrunken heads, but I bet you they saw some intrinsic power. I wonder if they tried to communicate with them. I mean, in Beetlejuice,
There was a movie in the 90s called Shrunken Heads.
Shrunken Heads?
Yeah.
There's a Shrunken Head, the guy that collects shrunken heads on Instagram.
Shrunken heads, also known as Santas, are severed human heads that have been shrunk and prepared for ceremonial and other uses. They were made by the Shuar and Ashuar people of Ecuador and South America. The skin was removed from the base of the neck. The eyes and mouth were sewn shut. The head was boiled in hot water. Hot stones or sand were poured into the head cavity and repeated several times.
To shrink it. But did they use them for divination? That's the question.
To capture the power of a murdered warrior soul known as the Muasak. To transfer that power to the woman of the tribe who tended to the crops and livestock and to strengthen the group and increased harvest.
So it was a fertility thing. And we've very much talked about how these things were related to fertility as well, So Roger Bacon.
The process of creating to trap and harness the power of avenging souls, also known as Messiah of a murdered warrior, which would be transferred to the woman of the tribe during the ceremony. Yeah.
Interesting. So here I got one from 1250, right? Roger Bacon. This is 300 years before Francis Bacon was reputed to be a wizard and is documented to have had a magical or mechanical head. This head could answer any question put to it with a yes or no. But with the help of a friar named Bungie, they had spent 7 years building the head for the reason of wishing to discover if they could make Britain impenetrable by ringing it with a solid brass wall. In all their attempts, only one time could they lure a demon into it with no positive answer and no yes or no one way or the other. In the end, the head was said to have either collapsed or exploded.
Ooh.
Right? And then we have 1267, the acclaimed alchemist and astronomer Albertus Magnus, who is one of the 37 donors of the Catholic Church, right? And it's called Saint Albert the Great. Albert of Cologne, Germany, had a head with a human voice and certain reasoning processes. This given to him by a Cacodemon, or an evil spirit. So these things, they just all through history, Let's see. Okay, so here we go. In America, as early as 1900, right? There's this guy called Joseph P. Freud, and they called him Josephie. He was a Viennese merchant in Austria who came to Chicago at age 19 and worked in a magic shop and had a mechanical creation called Balsamo, which was a living skull, as they called it, right? And it said the living skull was fabricated from painted copper inserted with real human teeth and would answer any question with its clicking jaw. So
copper would be used as a conductor.
So again, you have this natural element with the metallic element adhered to it, so and just these magical oracular, they're creating oracles,
It's a receiver,
right?
Huh.
Let's see. I mean, and then you can start looking at, what is it, Marconi, and him starting to understand wave frequency and creating, the first television broadcast and what all that entails. And it's interesting because the very first thing that was broadcast across the airwaves, and I've heard and I've looked for it, that it was the German Iron Cross, right? But I can't find that story anywhere. But the consistent story I do find is the first thing broadcasted on the television was a head of a marionette puppet that its mouth would open and close. So the very first thing broadcasted on television or through the airwaves of the television were essentially a talking head,
Is it the Queen's messenger?
I don't know. Oh, and that's also interesting.
Oh,
there you go.
The head of the ventriloquist dummy named Spooky Bill.
Right, and that was
creepy.
That's the first thing broadcast.
Oh,
image-wise on the television airwaves. But also, you ever watch Doctor Who?
No.
So at the end of time, there's this head that is, it's a face that's stretched on a canvas, and they moisturize it and keep it wet. And Doctor Who goes there and asks advice from this head, right? And Doctor Who is a hospitaler, right?
He's got hospitaler.
He's a hospitaler, a Knights Hospitaler. He has the Knights Hospitaler badge on the outside of his TARDIS, his time traveling telephone booth, right? And the Hospitalers are linked to the Knights Templars. So here we have the Knights Templars, right with the talking head on Doctor Who on the BBC, for everybody, right?
Where can we watch this? What is it called?
Spooky Bill.
Spooky Bill.
So let's do one last thing, and then so in the future, right? If we look at William Gibson's vision in his 1984 book Neuromancer, right? It's set in a dystopian future where two AIs merge into a singular superintelligence.
Two what?
Two AIs. So this is a fiction. This is science fiction.
And what year?
Written in 1984.
Okay.
It's a book called Neuromancer by William Gibson, right? And basically, these two AIs merge into a superintelligence with a platinum and jewel encrusted head that they occupy, right?
Oh, found it. Fair use clause.
Yep.
From the blue.
So that's Spooky Bill.
Oh, we gotta watch it.
Aye. The first living pictures from the blue.
This is a great day for me.
And it's a great day for me.
I can scarcely believe my eyes.
I can scarcely believe your eyes. But will they?
They'll believe, all right.
Why should they?
Because it's what they want.
Aye, maybe. But what will they get?
Well, I can't rightly say. But the biggest problem is solved. What remains is up to them.
They could have me, Johnny.
No. They won't want you, Bill.
Why not?
Well, you're not for real. And there'll be those who'll only want to see their kin.
You mean all this is just for that?
Aye. They'll want nothing else.
What a waste of time.
Maybe. But they'll want to see more of themselves than ever before. They'll give time to that.
But if they think this is really doing that, they'll believe anything.
Well, put like that. Maybe.
Then they'll believe in me, Johnny.
I just suppose they might, Bill.
And I'll be much, much easier to get along with.
Aye, that may be so.
And I'll show them a world they've never seen before.
Oh? How?
I'll perform a lot of tricks. And they'll take it all to be their own.
But it won't be theirs. That'll be cheating, Bill.
Oh, they'll not see it like that. And mine will be much more attractive. I'll be all in the future.
You're a fantastical little dummy. You'll have to convince a lot of people.
Only a few, Johnny. Only a very few. The rest'll soon follow. Then it'll all be mine. Aye, you'll see. You'll see. This'll all be Stooky Bill TV.
Ooh,
Yeah. So,
that was creepy.
right?
That's the first thing.
That's the first thing. Yeah. So in this final vision of these two AIs and William Gibson's Neuromancer, right? It says, this is out of the book. It says when the talking head would speak, right? And this is a let me get this part here again. It says the two AI intelligences are within a platinum and jewel encrusted head, right? Which, voiced by a beautiful arrangement of gears and miniature organ pipes. A perverse thing to hear because synth voice chips cost next to nothing. So basically, this super AI, this merging of two AIs, has such an ego that it doesn't want just a simple voice synthesizer chip. It like builds this head of platinum and all these gears and organs that make its voice up, versus a cheap synthesizer chip.
Yeah.
So, and when we get back into this creation of this super AI they're talking about, that's gonna, potentially monitor, come up with fixes for us. It's I don't know, interesting to say the least.
I don't really know enough about it, but one thing that I think about AI is that it's only going to be as smart as we can let it get.
Right. It's not smart.
It's not.
It's just an algorithm.
It's no different. I feel it's like it's a high-speed Google search.
Yeah. But super high speed.
Super high speed.
Yeah. Faster than humans can think, even potentially.
I mean, it can create artwork. It could write.
It can create artwork based around algorithms that dictate the parameters of the simulation that it makes from what it knows, but it cannot come up with an original idea.
No, it can't.
To be able and create that like an artist.
Mm-hmm.
It can make music, but it can't be inspired.
No.
And
anything it creates, it is inspired by whatever was created prior. So
we are the inspiration.
We are, yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make anything original.
No.
It's reforming.
It's a feedback loop.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. It's basically just it's taking everything that's already been done that's accessible to it,
right,
and just recreating it in a different form. That's
right.
why when they say that they can create like who's that? Name any pop star that's famous. They can take his or her voice and make music that sounds just like it. But
as has been proven, there's the guy on social media called "There I Ruined It," and he's having Hank Williams sing Ice Cube.
Yeah, I saw some stuff like that.
And he's got, so it's, But I don't know. I'd like to hear Hank Williams throwing down some Ice Cube bars. It's fun, I
don't really care for it.
I know. But at the same time, it's novel. That's the whole thing, It's this idea of when does the novel aspect of things outweigh the necessary aspect of things?
I would say once they're able to recreate somebody's voice to the point where you can't tell it's AI, and then same thing with images and videos, because what's going to end up happening is they were talking about deep fakes before. that can be dangerous.
Well, but at the same time, Star Wars, who has some of the most supreme visual technology out there as far as animation computers and whatnot, whenever you see Anakin or whenever, especially Princess Leia, you could tell it's CGI.
The newer ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's that far advanced, why can we still? I think inherently, the human can always kind of inherently know that there's something inhuman about a thing.
I think
that's presenting itself as human.
Well, look at the previous administration when they would have press conferences with Joe Biden. They were doing it on a fake set, and they got found out.
Well, and then also, how many of the potentially, masks were they using as well? It's hard to say. It's hard to know.
If the technology's available, they're going to use it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's a whole Philip K. Dick book. There's a whole Philip K. Dick book about the first simulacra president. That's actually a robot machine and gear kind of thing that they have, people behind the scenes, making it say what it's saying,
Yeah.
So just interesting in that, I don't know what year that was written in, but yeah, it's interesting, the world that we're living in where, we don't know.
We really have to start questioning it all.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, yeah.
But they could all,
Well, and you got that scam. You know about the scam where somebody will call up the grandparent and somehow they've cloned the voice of their grandchild.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me bail money or whatever. And apparently, I would say as you get older, you may become more prone to being susceptible to scams like that.
Yeah.
Because, your mind's in a different place and, the potential of all the different memory problems that you have as you get older,
Yeah.
So interesting days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. But yeah, so that was basically my whole thing on the oracles through the ages.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably a lot of stuff in there that was like, what?
Yeah. But if you're following it and you're really, if you just got to slow it down a little bit and really figure out where you're going with it.
Yeah.
What are they called again?
The teraphim.
Teraphim. Yeah. That's pretty cool stuff. Like I never knew about John the Baptist.
Yeah.
To that extent.
Right.
Or
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene. I wonder if it's really her head.
That's the
obviously.
question.
And same thing with John the Baptist.
Well, and that was the Hellenization. Constantine's mother, Helen, when they came into Jerusalem, basically she went to Jerusalem and found pieces of the original cross, found the nails that were driven.
And what year is this?
Oh, look it up. It's hard to say, but she found 4 nails that were driven through his hands and feet, which, some people say it's 3. It's hard to, but nonetheless, that was the whole thing. Was they were creating the temple of the Holy Sepulchre. They were creating all of these things that related to Christianity that basically created the tourist industry that the Knights Templars had to protect.
So this was in 250.
Yeah. So what year?
250.
250, yeah.
About the year 250.
Right. So, yeah. So about the year 250, you figure,
Wait. Am I reading this wrong? Fragments of the cross and tomb in which Jesus was buried in Golgotha.
So that's a whole
250 to 330.
Yeah. So you figure right as these Gospels were being written, I think Enoch was written around 150, 200. So you have all these things that are kind of coming into creating the idea of Catholicism at this point, right? But that's another thing, and we can maybe do that for another show, is the Golgotha, right? The mystery of Golgotha is basically Jesus was crucified on the same hill that Adam's remains were preserved within. So, but that's a whole nother topic of discussion. So,
Man.
yeah.
Well,
So,
you're going to have to come back and we'll go over all that.
go over some more stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff, though, man.
Yeah.
You know, and just the strange aspects of the history itself, you know, and how, you know, it's like with tarot, you know, there's 10,000 different decks now. All the little, you know, kids are buying them up. And just like when they put out the Ouija board, you know, back in, what was it, the 50s, you know, and I honestly, I've stayed away from Ouija boards.
I've never used
I don't
one.
want to use a Ouija board, you know. I just, it's not, you know, and it is kind of forbidden within the ideas of necromancy and communicating with the dead, you know. So, yeah. I
But
mean,
people are obsessed with it.
yeah, and then there's reports, who's to say if they're real or not, of people getting spirits attached
Yeah.
to them, you know. And,
Well, that guy on, he was on network television 20 years ago. John something, I can't remember his name, but he was a medium. And he was one of the biggest shows on TV. My parents would watch it.
Yep.
And I remember people thinking it was all real, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it is or it isn't. But
people want to believe it's real.
people want to believe it's real, but
Right.
I don't think that our relatives stay with us after they die. I think they move on.
Well, in tradition, you know, you had Sheol within like Greek culture, and it was the idea that after you died, you went to an intermediary holding place until the end of time, you know, which is why they would feed the dead, which is why they would, you know, you have all this ancestor worship that you see in all these different cultures, because they're wanting to keep them in a happy state with the you know, luxuries that they've come to accustomed to until they can, you know.
That's why the Egyptians would fill the tombs with all their possessions.
Yep.
People still do it now if somebody is
yeah.
buried.
Well, look at the terracotta army of the Chinese emperor.
Yeah.
You know, all of those warriors, all of those went with him into the afterlife.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was the purpose of doing that, was taking all of that into, so he would have his army in the afterlife. You know, it's this whole idea of, you know, what is material and what is spiritual is.
I knew an Italian family,
Yeah.
and it was a guy that passed away.
Mm-hmm.
He was older than me, but his mother was older. So she was like an old lady. And he was probably 40.
Yeah.
And he died. I don't know what of.
Yep.
But they had the dog. They had his dog put down, and they cremated
To go with him.
Yeah, they were Italian.
Yep.
I don't know if that's an Italian tradition or what, but
I think it leaks over into many different cultures.
probably. But the dog was old.
It's his companion.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the dog.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and you look back at some of the ancient tombs, and you know they would kill their wives and their slaves and their best horse,
Oof.
and they would, like, you know, put everything in there with them, because, you know.
That's insane.
Yeah. But, you know, the thinking of the world even now in many different ways is insane. Is just as insane.
I wonder if there's still spots in the world where that's happening.
Yeah.
Because there's still tribes that are
I know over in Taiwan, some of the Asian countries, every year, and like Mexico, how they have the Day of the Dead, they're venerating the dead. And, you know, in the Asian countries, they'll take money, like fake money, and they'll go and they'll burn it on a little plat to send it into the afterworld for them. And that stuff's still actively going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess it all depends how far into the jungle you want to go find out.
planet Earth, man.
Yeah.
You know, what experience do you want to have?
Well, we live in the first world, so
Yeah.
we don't know what's going on in the third
In a
world.
lot of places,
Yeah.
especially with the, suppression of information and, they curtail the American view.
Oh, there's got to be places that have no contact with the outside world.
Yeah. What was it? One of the Rockefellers, one of the Rothschilds went into some cannibal village, and he basically took musical instruments, and he's like, and he went into the jungle, and they never saw him again. So,
Man.
yeah.
Yeah. All that money didn't get him out of that.
Out of that, yeah. So that about wraps it up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to plug your stuff?
Oh, yeah. If anybody wants to go out, check out my other stuff, you can go to my Linktree, which is Linktree R Marx, and that will pull up everything I got from my Patreon, my social media, my podcast, my website for my art, and my Etsy for my art. And if you want to support, you can either buy a coffee or you can buy some art.
Nice.
So, yep.
And the name of your podcast is Metta Mindcast.
The Metta Mindcast, yeah.
And you can find me on X at 33 Hertz Media.
Yep.
All right, man. Until next
Cool.
time.
Always good talking, man.
Yeah.